Hello, and welcome to Challenge Everything. Today, I'm going to talk about Noam Chomsky and animal rights. Noam Chomsky is a well-known and respected American philosopher, scientist, and political activist, among other things. I first came across him in context of his commentary on the power of advertisement in capitalism, and as such, how it controls us. If you're not aware of what he has to say on this matter, it's well worth a look. However, though Chomsky is a clever, intelligent man who has much light to shine in many areas of political, social and scientific philosophy, his approach to animal ethics falls well short of the mark. As we will see, he is blinded by his own biases and reasons on this topic not with logic, but with weak and false arguments. Let's have a listen to what he has to say.
Hello, Professor Chomsky. I am perturbed by two questions of moral philosophy. The first one is concerning Peter Singer. Is he right on animal rights?
Chomsky in this clip is asked, is Peter Singer right on animal rights? First, some context. Peter Singer is a moral philosopher that proposed that the basic moral principle of animal rights should be extended beyond humankind to encompass animals as well. The justification he gives for this is by invoking Jeremy Bentham's reasoning. The question is not, can they reason, nor can they talk, but can they suffer? Singer goes on to clarify that if a being has the capacity to suffer and at the other end of the scale experiences enjoyment, then they are what can be accurately described as sentient. As Singer says, if a being suffers, there can be no moral justification for refusing to take that suffering into consideration. No matter what the nature of the being, the principle of equality requires that its suffering be counted equally with the like suffering, insofar as rough comparisons can be made, of any other being. Note here that Singer is not claiming that equal rights should be afforded across the board to all animals with sentience. He is not stating that human rights should be extended to animals, or put another way, that animals should be afforded the same rights as humans, but that an animal's sentience or capacity to experience life should deserve it rights enough not to suffer at the hands of humans, particularly not merely for food. Singer's Practical Ethics is well worth a read, whether you agree or disagree with this reasoning, and I shall put a link below to the chapter I have referred to. For the remainder of this video, it should be known that I agree with the principles of Singer's reasoning, and I shall go on to explain why I believe Chomsky misses the mark when reasoning against it. It should also be noted that if one follows Singer's logic to its reasonable and natural end, one must take the vegan stance, that of not causing unnecessary suffering, and causing as little necessary suffering as possible, thus deeming it necessary. I can explore this concept in a later video in more depth if people so wish. Let's take a look at his response.
Well, just out of curiosity, do you kill insects, like mosquitoes, when they're bothering you? Or do you think that when mosquitoes are carrying malaria, we ought to develop means to kill them off? Well, question. Okay, that's part of the answer.
So, if you're not already outraged by Chomsky's false reasoning here, I shall now explain exactly what is wrong with his argument. Firstly, when taking the logically consistent position of veganism, one realises that these two questions are different and thus have slightly different answers. The question of whether one kills insects is an interesting one, and one that I've heard disputed amongst vegans. The bottom line is that if they are causing human suffering, they can reasonably be killed. If they are not, leave them alone. This is logically consistent, for as I mentioned earlier, we are not rewarding an insect as a sentient being the same rights as a human. Indeed, the human has a far greater level of sentience than an insect. We are allowing them the right to not be needlessly slaughtered unless it is affecting the well-being of those with greater sentience to it. Now, there are some exceptions to this logic, as it is a fairly complex issue. I'm more than happy in another video to go through these, but for now, I'll leave it at that. Using the same logic, it is clear that the answer to, is it right to kill mosquitoes that are carrying malaria, is clearly, yes, absolutely. Affording animals rights does not mean you have to either afford them equal rights as humans, nor does it mean that an animal's right to life is greater than that of a human. Indeed, as a human's level of sentience is far greater than that of a mosquito, and mosquitoes can spread malaria, a cause of a great amount of human suffering, it is morally justifiable to kill them to prevent this. However, what Chomsky fails to address in his argument is that the justified, necessary cull of insects to continue positive human well-being does not at all even begin to justify the eternal global holocaust that is the meat industry, causing billions of sentient deaths every year. Nor does it give any moral justification to enslaving billions of animals, stealing their bodily produce from them before murdering them when they are no longer needed. Indeed, comparing the justified killing of insects to murdering livestock for food is morally dishonest and has no philosophical or moral standing. Yet, as can be seen in the video, Chomsky receives a healthy round of applause from the audience. So far is the brainwashing that we receive, encouraging us to continue eating meat, that so many of us accept a false answer from a clever man without question. Let's continue listening to Chomsky.
Sure, animals should have rights, but none of us believe that including Peter Singer, that animals should have the rights of human beings.
No one believes that, so why even mention it? You seem to be arguing against a point that doesn't even exist. Despite clearly being aware of Singer's argument, you choose to argue with a point that does not address a single aspect of his argument.
And there's good reasons for that. The rights don't exist in a vacuum if you're talking about moral philosophy. The rights are associated with responsibilities. We don't attribute any responsibilities at all to other animals, do we? I mean, we don't say that a lion has to be sent to the gas chamber if it kills a gazelle, let's say. No, they don't have responsibilities. And that, of course, if in moral philosophy, now just abstract discussion, relates to the question of what their rights are.
So here, Chomsky is arguing that we can only afford rights to those with moral responsibilities. He argues that because a lion does not have a moral responsibility to make a choice between killing and not killing a gazelle, that therefore the lion cannot be afforded reasonable animal rights. In other words, because an animal cannot make the same moral choices that a human can, it therefore means that an animal does not deserve the same moral rights as a human. Even if this were to be true, which I do not take it to be, there are several flaws with it. Firstly, it is only an argument against affording animals equal rights to humans, something that he says in the statement before is clearly not Peter Singer's position, and is not the view he is arguing against. Neither Singer nor vegans believe that animals should have equal rights to humans, merely rights, as a result of their level of sentience, that allow them to live without being needlessly slaughtered. Moreover, if we were to take the argument that moral rights may only be afforded to those with moral responsibility, as Sam Harris points out in his book The Moral Landscape, what happens when you apply the same logic you are comfortable applying in the animal kingdom to members of our own species? Neither a baby nor a severely mentally disabled person can be considered to have a moral responsibility, as they do not have a perception of human morality. Yet if we follow this same logic, it would mean the justified murder, for food no less, of both babies and the severely mentally disabled. I hope it is clear to you how this analogy is a totally false one and not applicable even in theoretical philosophy to justify actions towards anyone, human or animal. Indeed, it is such an outdated mode of thinking, it is an absolute disgrace that such a brilliant thinker would resort to such tosh.
And they should have rights. So, for example, it's a step forward in our general kind of moral development that animals are not subjected to torture in the way they were just a few years ago. So in Britain and the United States, there are now constraints on the torture, what we call experiment torture of at least animals that are closer to us, like primates, than there were 30 or 40 years ago. So yes, we're developing some sort of conception of rights, but I don't think anyone thinks that animals have the rights and responsibilities of human beings.
So firstly, I'll deal with his final statement. Once again, Chomsky reiterates that no one thinks animals should be afforded the same rights as human beings. No, you said that. No one disagrees with you. You are asked if Singer is correct, yet you are arguing against a position that you even said yourself Singer does not hold. This is a self-stated straw man, and it is a disgrace that you argue in such a way. Then, to deal with what Chomsky mentions regarding the successes of animal rights groups to reduce the experimentation done on primates in the US and the UK. Of course, this is nothing but a good thing. However, it is interesting that he recognises this as torture, yet mentions nothing about the ongoing, unnecessary animal tests that still go on, not just in the US and the UK, but around the globe. I wonder if he would consider them torture. Nor does he mention the suffering of billions of animals each year, being enslaved and murdered for the produce of their bodies to satiate the greedy and selfish mouths of human beings. I wonder if he would call that torture. So why mention this? It is, in my opinion, merely a clever man, paying meaningless lip service to animal rights so he can claim some kind of moral superiority. Sure, he has just used totally fallible logic to justify the needless slaughter of sentient animals. Sure, he makes no attempts to justify why this torture should continue, but just in case you are starting to doubt this man's moral fibre, he does support the freedom of some monkeys not to be tortured. How morally righteous. So that's all I've got to say in response to this video. If you've enjoyed it, let me know. If you disagree with me or I got something wrong, drop a comment down below, as I'm always open to debate and conversation, and I certainly do not consider myself above being re-educated. If you want me to do a video on something in particular, whether it be on the topic of veganism, religion, politics or anything else, let me know. Thanks very much for watching, and until next time, remember... challenge everything.
Okay, that's part of the answer. You can pursue. Sure, animals should have rights, but none of us believe that